Welcome to Cardboard Wizards. On the last episode, I explained how to generate mana, what are lands, and how to use them. In this episode, I will tell you how a turn of Magic the Gathering looks like. Note, a deck of Magic the Gathering is referred to as library. Before the game starts, each player will shuffle their decks and give it to their opponent so that they may shuffle or cut it. Then, the deck is returned to the original owner. Note, even if the opponent does nothing, you may cut it yourself. With your deck now in hands, you will draw 7 cards from the top of your library. Now it's time to take a look at your cards in hand and look for a few lands and some spells that can be played with them. If each player is fine with their respective hands, the game can start. When a player does not want to keep his starting hand, he can do a mulligan. What is a mulligan? To take a mulligan, you shuffle your hand back, draw 7 new cards, and then put a card on the bottom of your deck for each mulligan you have taken this game. So you go from 7 cards to 6, from 6 to 5, and so on. You can keep doing mulligans until you only have 1 card in hand, but that is, of course, not recommended. The goal for a mulligan is to look for a better starting hand, with a few lands and low-cost spells to play in the early stages of the game. Now that each player has shuffled their decks and drawn a starting hand, it's time to randomly pick the one to play first, or who gets to decide that. For that, you can roll dices, and the highest number wins. Play rock, paper, scissors. Play odds or evens. The winner gets to choose who goes first. The game's default turn order begins with the starting player and proceeds clockwise if there are more than 2 players in the game. A turn of MTG consists of 5 phases. Note, a few of them may have more steps to be followed inside. Beginning phase. In the beginning phase, there are 3 steps to be followed. Untap step. In this step, you'll untap every card that is tapped on your field and play. For example, your lands, creatures, artifacts, and so on. Upkeep. Here, some abilities will trigger, some things may happen. The key here is to pay attention to your cards in play. There are many cards that will have abilities to resolve in the upkeep. A weak creature can transform into a terrifying werewolf, or a fearsome entity, or just allow you to play things for free. Draw step. You get to draw 1 card from the top of your library in this step. In all multiplayer formats, with 3 or more players, the starting player gets to draw a card on turn 1. Step 2. Main Phase 1. In this step, you can play every type of card, as long as you can pay their costs, without restrictions. Note, outside your main phases, the only types of spells you can cast are instants and cards with the keyword Flash. Step 3. Battle Phase or Combat Phase. This step is divided into 5 sub-steps. Important note, players can only attack other players, a battle card, or a planeswalker card. Also, players may choose not to attack at all, unless a card says otherwise. Beginning of combat. The player announces that they are entering combat. Some abilities may trigger here, just like on the upkeep step. Declare attackers. In this step, the attacking player will choose which creatures will attack by tapping them, turning them in 45 to 90 degrees to illustrate it. Declare blockers. And here, the attacked player will decide which creatures will block. A single creature can be blocked by multiple creatures. To block with a creature, you don't need to tap it. You just need to indicate that you wish to block with it. Damage step or combat damage. In this step, creatures will deal damage equal to their power. Note, some creatures deal damage, roughly saying, faster than others. Abilities like First Strike and Double Strike allows them to do this before others. So, before you resolve the regular damage calculation, check for creatures with such abilities and resolve them first. Each creature has base power and toughness on its lower right corner. The number on the left represents its power, and the right one, its toughness. When a creature deals damage, it uses its power. If a creature is dealt damage by another creature, you just need to subtract the damaged creature's toughness by the damaging one's power. If the power of the attacking creature is greater or equal to the toughness of the defending creature, the damaged creature goes to the graveyard pile. When a player is dealt combat damage by a creature, they lose that many life points. When an attacking creature is blocked by more than one creature, it deals its damage distributed as you choose among its blockers. Note that it must assign lethal damage to each blocker before assigning damage to the next. Each blocking creature deals its damage to the attacker. End of combat. In this step, some abilities that say "at end of combat" will trigger here, and after resolving, the combat ends and all remaining creatures, battles, and planeswalkers leave combat. Main Phase 2. Same thing as Main Phase 1. Note: a player can only play one land per turn, unless a card makes an exception. End step. Just like on the upkeep, some abilities trigger here, and abilities that say "until end of turn" will end. Your creatures will heal. Before ending your turn, you need to count the cards on your hand and discard down to maximum hand size. The maximum hand size is 7. You only need to do this at the end of your turn, after all abilities resolve. The Golden Rule. A card can change the rules of a game. A player may only play one land per turn, but cards like Explore change that. Also in the draw step, a player only draws one card, but cards like Avaricious Dragon make an exception. How do you win the game? There are 4 ways to win a game in Magic. 1. Reducing your opponent's life points to 0. Combat damage, direct damage, losing life with abilities or effects can reduce your life points. 2. Empty deck. If a player would draw a card and their library has no cards in it, they lose the game. Cards that mill, for example, help you to achieve this. To mill a card, you put the top card of your library into your graveyard. 3. Poison counters. Some creatures deal damage in the form of poison counters. These creatures have the keyword Infect. A creature with Infect does not deal damage, but it reduces the power and toughness of creatures that it damages, and when it would deal damage to players, it gives that many poison counters instead. A creature with Toxic can deal regular combat damage to creatures and also to players, but whenever they deal damage to players, they also give a specific amount of poison counters. Venomous Brutalizer, for example, if it would deal damage to a player, they would lose 4 life and get 3 poison counters, because this creature has Toxic 3. When a player gets the total of 10 poison counters, they lose the game. 4. Card effects. Some card effects require a certain condition to be met, and once done, the player who casted it wins the game. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. See you again next time.